Hello and welcome to the day in the life of a hardware asset manager. Today's use case, resolve bad asset data in my CMDB. Let's first understand what some of the most common causes are of having bad data. First of all, manual errors. Human error is a significant factor, especially when data is entered manually and updated infrequently. And when you have infrequently updated data, that leads to another cause, outdated information. Your CMDB data needs to be regularly refreshed to reflect the dynamic changes in your IT environment. Having outdated information will lead to inaccurate representations of the environment. It's plain and simple. The third common cause is inconsistency with the data, especially when data for IT hardware assets are collected from multiple sources. You're going to have your workstations, so that's your desktops and laptops, your mobile devices, your tablets, your server infrastructure, storage equipment, networking gear, printers, peripherals, and other devices that are not connected to a network, all populated through multiple sources. And because of that, inconsistencies can arise if your standards are not followed or if data is not normalized. Missing or duplicates. Deficient CMDBs will likely have missing assets or duplicate entries, especially when, again, data is gathered from multiple sources. So why does this matter? Why is it so important to have an accurate CMDB? Poor decision making. When your CMDB data is inaccurate, it becomes very, very difficult to make an informed business decision about your strategic IT investments, about the resources that you're going to require, and the risk that you need to mitigate within your environment. Increased security risk. Undiscovered or unmanaged assets is a consequence of poor data quality, but those assets will become potential targets for cyber threats. If you don't know where your assets are or what you even have, how can you get your teams to patch them? How can you make sure that the software that's on those devices is being governed and you don't even know the device exists? Another important point is around operational inefficiency. Inaccurate data will lead to wasted time and resources when troubleshooting incidents, managing changes, or just to fulfill a request. Compliance issues. Failing to track assets and their configurations can lead to non-compliance with regulatory requirements, internal policies, software publisher or vendor terms and conditions, etc. And a direct consequence of compliance issues could be a financial implication. So misunderstanding asset usage can lead to unnecessary software license purchases, hardware refresh costs, or even the loss of equipment. So how can we address this? A few points to go over. Data quality controls. Most of the success of an ITAM practice hinges on process. So establishing processes for data entry, controls within your tools to ensure that validation and reconciliation is taking place to ensure the accuracy of your book of record is a very important part of the equation. Automating data collection. So if you leverage automated discovery tools like Intune or SCCM or other discovery tools, network monitoring or security tools to populate and update your CMDB, just by doing that automation, you're going to minimize the errors involved in that process. Data normalization. Ensuring that you have a consistent naming convention, versions, and other attributes across the CMDB for your IT hardware is critical. Making sure that your publisher or your manufacturer name is always going to be consistent, the model naming convention is consistent, making sure that the categorization of the asset that you've just discovered is also consistent in a standard, clear name throughout the CMDB is critical to addressing a lot of the challenges that we spoke about. Regular asset audits. Conducting periodic audits to identify and correct data inconsistencies, errors, and missing information is also a very, very useful tool to have in your arsenal. And finally, user education. Providing regular training to users who interact with the CMDB. You're going to have multiple teams interact with asset records. Keep in mind, the IT asset management team are merely custodians of the data. They're accountable for the accuracy of the data, but they're not necessarily responsible for every step in that process. So make sure that the teams that are interacting with the CMDB are doing so with strict adherence to controls and processes. Introducing things like annual training, quarterly lunch and learns, etc., are great ways to engage the broader audience in coming together to maintain the accuracy of your book of record. In addition to all of this, having a powerful technology platform to govern your asset quality is extremely important, not just proactively by making sure that there's appropriate data controls and policies in place to avoid issues downstream, but also having reactive mechanisms to come across challenges and quickly course correct. Let me show you what I mean. You are now looking at the hardware asset management workspace within the ServiceNow platform. This is available as an out-of-the-box experience to hardware asset managers who are licensed for the hardware asset management product on the platform. Right at the very top of the screen that you're looking at within the asset estate module is this concept of important actions. Important actions are intended to highlight data completeness and quality gaps within the book of record so that you could be informed about things like missing locations for assets, missing PO numbers, missing asset tags, etc., access those records on the fly, and start chipping away at solving that problem. This is a great reactive mechanism to ensuring quality. As you navigate to other modules within the hardware asset workspace, you will see this consistent theme of important actions. I've just navigated to the inventory module. Inventory has to do with assets that are in a stockroom, warehouse, or sitting on a shelf. They too need to ensure that they have certain attributes kept up to date, like the stockroom that it's part of, the name of a stockroom to which an asset is assigned, stockrooms that don't have service locations set up, etc. Similarly, as you go down to other modules like model management, now you're dealing with the model blueprint behind the asset itself. So if an asset is missing a model number, missing the useful life or the refresh cycle, models that are missing a name or a manufacturer name. Clicking into any one of these cards will take you directly into the impacted records so that you can start to chip away at the problem. Carrying on from that theme, the contract management module will identify contracts that are coming up for renewal, potentially duplicate contract records, contracts that are missing an administrator or an end date. It's important to note that these important action cards are configurable. So if there are certain attributes that you do care about that are not identified here, you can go ahead and configure that in. Similarly, if there are attributes that you don't care too much about, you can omit them from the important actions view. These are all examples of reactive updates to the book of record. From a more proactive perspective, how do you ensure you minimize the reactive work? One example is to ensure data quality controls. Let's take the example of a contract. Let's open up this contract that has a missing end date. Now, in theory, every contract should have a start and end date by default. So if I click into this contract record, I can make sure that within the contract form, I can make sure that the start and end date fields are both mandatory, meaning that a record cannot be created and then set to an active state without having the start and end dates populated. Similarly, a contract will always need an administrator, someone that governs the contract. This can also be made a mandatory field. To further ensure the quality of your records, make sure that fields that can be referenced back to other tables in the CMDB, like the user table, in this example of a contract administrator, is always set so that you're absolutely ensuring that you're selecting the right users without spelling mistakes or other errors. And so that if users eventually, let's say, leave the organization, you can create notifications to be alerted when a user that also happens to be a contract administrator is no longer with the company. You can take this example and apply it to numerous attributes across assets, contracts, inventory, etc. There you have it. Having a powerful platform can help you mitigate against data quality issues across your asset practice. Thank you for watching.